Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another episode of the 33 Fuel vlog. My name is Warren, I'm one of the co-founders at 33, and I will be your host for this episode with none other than George Anderson. Who is George Anderson, I hear you say? Well, you're going to know exactly who he is after this, but this is why you might well be interested. George is someone who has a deep background in the fitness and performance coaching space. I first met him years ago when I was writing a feature for Men's Fitness magazine, and George was introduced to me as a running expert on training for the marathon, but maximizing the value of your training while minimizing the time. Not by doing some crazy or dodgy hacking or anything like that, but simply by absolutely focusing on totally smart training as opposed to simple volume. George's approach was to get your maximum marathon result on just 3 runs a week. Way less than an ordinary program. And he didn't just preach this, he practiced it as well. He went and ran a sub 3 hour marathon himself on exactly that sort of training. And it's from this first meeting that George and I really hit it off, because he has a brilliantly inquiring and open mind. George is always looking to learn more, grow more, develop more, perform better as an athlete, perform better as a human being, perform better as a businessman. And it's all these skills that he now rolls together many years later as he's moved a long way out of the physical coaching space and more into the mental and mindset coaching space. And what we're going to be looking at today specifically is identity. How the way you see yourself and the way you describe yourself relate so closely to the way you actually are, which is a brilliant thing if the way you are is exactly what you want. But it can be an equally brilliant thing if you can understand this framework. And if you don't have the results you want yet, you can use this framework in order to change that identity and change the end result. So look, this is what we're going to be diving into. It's a brilliant chat. I hope you're going to enjoy it as much as I did, because really this is our mission here at 33 Fuel. It is about giving athletes the power and the tools to become the best versions of themselves they can possibly be. And we do that here in our vlog, in our podcast, on our social media and on our blog, sharing the best performance content we can get from all over the world. And we do it in store at 33fuel.com with the very best, the most delicious, the most incredible high performance natural sports nutrition. So you can check us out there at 33fuel.com, but not until you've checked out this interview with George Anderson.
George Anderson, in the flesh. It has taken us 2 and a bit years, I think.
It's been 2 years. I was checking back through my messages, and it was about 2 years ago in August, so over 2 years. But I said, oh, Warren, I'm going to have to reschedule our podcast today. I had a flat tyre or something. And then here we are 2 years later, there's one hell of a flat.
Well, I think we got through some of the longest ever games of phone tennis.
Oh, they were months long they went. Yeah, that was something of a record.
It was. The likes of busy diaries and, well, let's say good intentions, great plans, and here they are. But the best things are the things that you need to wait for a bit. They need to grow, they need time to germinate. The good news is the kind of themes we were looking at examining 2 years ago, they're not just still relevant. I think there's so much more you can talk about them now as opposed to then.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And we've had this back and forth, what should we talk about? We've had a few phone calls when the voice rail tennis eventually did break the rally, and we got to speak to each other. And I just love talking to you anyway. And you start off thinking, let's talk about this. And it goes off on a tangent. And we end up kind of coming away from it, well, certainly I do, thinking, that was fascinating. We should record that one day.
and now we actually are. But you're right. I mean, I find the same thing, that we've had so many conversations about stuff over the years. It began, I think we first connected through Men's Fitness, wasn't it?
Yes, that's right. It was Joel Snake. I think I've got in touch with Joel, and he had done a piece on training for an Ironman, CrossFit style. I remember the piece in the magazine, so I got in touch and said, hey, look, I'm doing similar stuff, training for marathons with just 2 runs a week. And then he put me in touch with you to do a piece on marathon training, I think.
I think it was. It was a run training piece. And that's where we're sort of going to go with this conversation, or at least as a thread to kick us off. The idea of what you say you are, what you badge yourself as, and how that positively or negatively can affect your growth, your development, and how you perform in your life. Because, like me, you've worn many different badges over the years. So when we met at that point, you were absolutely full on with your running and your run coaching, and that was where everything was at.
Yeah, and certainly when I came into the fitness industry in 2002, having my degree at Loughborough University was in automotive engineering, so not an obvious step, but I'd done my gym qualifications and I'd been working part-time as a gym instructor, so it kind of made sense to me to go into just PT, personal training. But after a year or so, it became very apparent that actually if I wanted to do any kind of make any waves in this industry and have the kind of impact that I wanted to have, I was going to have to pick a lane, like decide what am I going to specialise in. Everyone says, oh, you've got to specialise, you've got to just be one thing. And to an extent that's true, and something we'll definitely get into in the course of today's conversation, I'm sure. But I decided very early on, because I was in Reading, and the Reading Half Marathon was just being rejuvenated by the sweatshop, and it was almost kind of crashing and burning, and then they got it back on track, and it's a huge event now. So I partnered with them and became the training partner for a number of years, over a decade actually. And that really made me realise that I could just say, well, I'm a running coach, because I was already doing a lot of running, obviously I had my coaching, and so I just brought the two passions and skill sets together and said, well, this is what I'm all about. So I labelled myself as George the Running Guy.
And as George the Running Guy, one of your big things was working smart as opposed to necessarily working hard. You referred to it earlier, and I think that's how you come onto the men's fitness radar, was marathon training on 2 runs a week. Can you do it? Now, this is that idea of the 80-20 and sort of focusing on the things that make the biggest difference. You didn't just sort of teach that as theory. You did it yourself. I mean, you ran a sub-3 hour marathon.
Yeah, only just. That was a very, very painful last few miles, I tell you. The Cork Marathon, yeah.
Sub-3 is a sub-3.
Yeah, absolutely.
On your 2 runs a week.
And I really did want to test out this theory. And actually, from there, I developed what I call the intelligent running series. So I've got the I Marathon, the I Half, the I-10 project. But they're all based on 3 runs a week. I figured 2 runs probably was a bit extreme for most people, but 3 seemed to get a good balance between doing enough quality training, but not doing the junk miles that a lot of running training programs had in them, that seemed to lead to injury. And what I realised was that more runners were failing to get to the start line than those who got to the start line and failed to get to the finish. So if you can get to the start line in reasonable shape, again, 80-20, you might be 80% of the conditioning that you might potentially get to, but you'll get there. And you'll obviously can't completely eradicate the risk of injury, but you'll reduce dramatically the risk of injury by focusing on the quality and the conditioning work that goes around it. So that's the thing that I wanted to try and not just prove, because I'm sure other people have done similar, but I wanted to use that as the launch pad to demonstrate and to perhaps inspire or challenge people's perceptions to think, well, I do quite fancy running a marathon, and I've always said I haven't got the time to train 6 days a week. Maybe there is an alternative approach, and that was the idea of doing the 2 run a week training program.
So then, as the evolution into your own both business, professional, personal outlook goes, George the running guy, George the marathon guy, maybe a half marathon, this is where you're at, then becomes George the ultramarathon guy as you start running. Well, you ran your first 100 miler, or did you do the 7 marathons in 7 days?
Yeah, 10 marathons in 10 days. Don't forget those last 3 marathons.
3 marathons is a lot.
Yeah, so I did the 10 in 10, and that was, I guess that was in many ways inspired by yourself, a friend of mine, well, you know as well, you presented alongside him, Joey Duffy, over in Ireland, and Alex Bellini as well, another kind of mutual friend, ultra adventurer, and I sort of looked at what other people were doing, and you with the Ultra Children Mont Blanc and other escapades, and I had this idea of sort of interviewing people like you and finding out, well, what was driving you, what was your mindset like, what was your sequencing of figuring out what challenge you were going to take on when there's so many different things you could do. And somebody said to me, as a guy who I was just having a coffee with, he was a broadcaster out in Oxford, he said, George, I was telling you this, George, you need to write your own narrative. And that was such a moment for me, this kind of oh my goodness, like I can just go out and do something like this myself and figure these things out for myself. And of course, I leaned on you, I leaned on Jerry and Alex and other people I knew to kind of get your advice and your wisdom. But then I went out and I got that experience as well for myself and had a thoroughly enlightening time doing it. And so the 10 marathons in 10 days was my first foray into the world of kind of multi-day ultra endurance events.
So that's the first really longer distance, 10 marathons, 10 days, and good point you make there that everyone who goes to do anything like this, whether it's starting a business, creating something new in their life, or a sporting challenge, is standing on the shoulders of everyone who came before.
Absolutely.
Someone has done this. Yours will be different, but learn from those people who've done it. So, you did that, but also then that was something that you were able to share with your audience who are they're 2 steps behind and that they're doing the marathons and things. Maybe they want to do this. You use all your teaching skills to bring that out. George the marathon guy, now it's George 10 marathon guy. It then becomes George ultra marathon guy, you run 100, and then after that you're thinking, well, George the Ironman guy, you went and did the Ironman.
Yeah, that was the big sort of first big major departure from just running, and for me that was actually more about the swimming than anything else. And I figured that there were so many different ultras out there, so many different amazing adventures that I could potentially go on, and people were very quick to say, oh, you should try this one, try that one, try that. Amazing opportunities. But actually, the reality was both the 10-10 and the ultra, which was Endure 24 down in Reading, which is a 5-mile loop. So you just keep on going around for 24 hours. And both of those were quite convenient for me. So they didn't take, 10-10, I made my own route, made my own event up, and just went and did it by myself. Bit of support, you ran a few laps with me.
Alex came down.
Yeah, and so we had. But I made
you had
it easy
half
for
a
myself.
team come and join you for
Yeah,
the last
for the last one, that was great. Police escort in for the finish, but it was still very convenient. So even actually on that, in that week and a half that I was doing it for, I was also doing the school run. I decided that September the 2nd, my birthday, was a great time to do something like this, nice and poignant. And I forgot that was also the day my children went back to school.
And let's face it, three children.
Three children.
So convenient is very important. It has to be doable.
Exactly. So I had to fit in with my lifestyle. I knew that I wasn't going to be able to, and didn't want to go and do like the Marathon des Sables, for example. One day maybe, but at that time in my life it wasn't the right thing for me to do. But I still wanted to get the challenge aspect. So I ended up doing it, but then having to also do the school run, because my wife was also back to work that week, that same day. So it was kind of really bad timing in the end, but it was still, that all added to it. Right? It was a whole logistics and organisation that was a part of that challenge. It wasn't just the fitness, turn up and run a marathon, then recover and do it again the next day. So having done that and then done 100, it was, well, what next? I had all these opportunities, and I realised that it was just a case of doing the same but different and more of what I could already do. I knew I could run, but it wasn't that next step change and challenge. Whereas the Ironman did give me that, because I couldn't swim more than 2 lengths of a pool, which was a little bit embarrassing, but at the same time,
I know that feeling.
But at the same time, it was my opportunity to go through that whole beginner's stage and that beginner's mind, the whole Zen thing, right? Approaching things from a completely, everything was new. Ultra running was just more of the same. Swimming was just completely different. So that was the thing that really appealed to me about Ironman.
So then after all that, as this is growing, you've got the coaching business, the online coaching, all the other things you're doing, but at the same time, you're starting to put on more events that go a little broader, starting to look at mindset and other things. And this is where we come to the big shift, because am I right in saying that now, if you were to meet somebody fresh now, the areas of business you're looking at, the kind of people you're looking to reach in and sort of affect and help, you're not George the running guy anymore, you're not really George the endurance guy anymore. I mean, what would you describe yourself as now?
So it's a great question, and it's I guess really is the essence of this conversation that we're having today. Is like, how do you label yourself? And I made a very conscious decision a few years ago that I wanted to move away from being George the running guy, because I was reaching beyond those boundaries that people identified me as, and I was identifying myself as. And it's like, well, I'm deviating too far. So I said, well, what if I were to shift away from that and actually just own my space and decide that this is what I'm interested in, this is the message I want to give. So it became a lot more about mindset, motivation, and just well-being in general. And well-being is a word that's evolved itself over the last decade, 2 decades, especially with the influence of positive psychology, which is the study of well-being, the scientific study of well-being and happiness. And it's not so much about the physical, but it's about the mindset, it's about the psychology. How do you actually take yourself from doing okay and take it up to a point where you're flourishing? And I was doing my thing with the fitness and the nutrition and the mindset and motivation. And then I sort of evolved into doing a lot more of the mindset, but it's still applied to runners, to people who wanted to lose weight, tone up, get fit, which is the main market for personal trainers. And I wanted to get deeper into the reasons why that was important, the things that were stopping people and holding them back, and actually how to help them remove some of those barriers. And I realised that this was actually very applicable to many other audiences as well. And so now, over the last certainly 2.5 years, I've been making real inroads into identifying myself as a speaker, as a motivational speaker, not just someone who goes when rah rah, get motivated, but with a message of, you mentioned about 80-20 here, progress not perfection is a big thing that I talk a lot about.
Progress not perfection, you say?
Yeah, so progress not perfection is something that many people use that expression, but for me it's more than just a bumper sticker, right? It means something. It is my philosophy for life. It's in evidence in all the ultra things that I've done in my business and everything, because what I've noticed with myself and with the people that I've worked with is if you say, this is what I want to achieve, this is what I have to do, this is the way I have to go about doing it, and that's perfect, but it's unsustainable. Whereas if you have more of a progressive approach, right, I just want to make a bit more progress with this, I want to do a bit better, and you keep on making that like relentless forward progress, then you get to where you want to be, but you've done it in a way that builds confidence and momentum, rather than building overwhelm and the all or nothing cycle that so many people are familiar with when it comes to diet in particular. So I wanted to share those messages that actually you can do pretty well without having to try and do it all. And also the benefits of taking care of yourself, whether that's through your diet, your activity and exercise, your sleep, also super important, hydration. All of these physical well-being things, they're not just about losing weight. They're not just about training for an event. These are things that are going to make you feel better right now, like immediately and over the course of the next few hours, say the next 24 hours. The decisions you make with your food, exercise, sleep again the next day. What a difference it makes, right, when you've had a good night's sleep.
Yeah, it's
and so I wanted to help people make that connection between the choices they make on a daily basis and how they feel and how they perform inside their heads with their relationships, in the workplace, productivity, concentration, ability to collaborate, people tolerance, and all of these important things when you're working, and just be happier, right? To have a better experience of life, and that's what I wanted to start becoming more of, rather than just the running guy.
Because I think that's also why we've connected a lot over the years. Is the running was the common ground that brought us together, but I've always found it very sort of stimulating and inspiring, the way you look at whether it's problem solving or health and well-being in general, or movement, or how do you approach your business, how do you break things down, and you take it way beyond the running sphere, even though that was where we first connected. And in terms of that development, for you to become in terms of your identity, what you project and what you bring back, in terms of, this is what I'm going to take into the world, this is what I'm going to give to people, that is now related to so much more than just running, and that identity you've had to change. To achieve that, you've had to a degree, kill off or stop being George the running guy.
Yeah.
And how do you find that transition whereby, that thing that you were very good at and that has become a part of your personality, in order for the next one for you to evolve and to get to where you want to go, you kind of have to get rid of that really comfortable well-established ground and personality. How did that transition work?
So I think there's actually a part of me that fears being labelled and being put in a box. I remember when I was doing, as well as the running, my local business when I live in Tame, near just outside of Oxford. Well, actually, Long Crendon, just outside of Tame, just outside of Oxford. No one's ever heard of Long Crendon, let alone Tame. So, and I used to run a boot camp. So I had a bit of a business going there. I was running maybe 7 or 8 sessions a week. I had a couple of instructors working for me, different locations, Oxford, Aylesbury, Tame. And people would know me in the town. So I was not well known, but people would stop me in the street sometimes and say, "Well, you're George the boot camp guy," or they'd introduce me as George the boot camp guy, and that was great for the business. But then eventually, I was like, I don't want to be put in that box of being George the boot camp guy. And it was probably 2 or 3 years after that I eventually moved away from that business as well and passed that on, which is still running now. To one of my coaches runs it, and he's done a great job of evolving that, and it's now his thing. But it was like a line in the sand. It's like I wasn't just transitioning away and trying to call myself something different. I had to make the decision I'm not going to do the boot camp anymore. And because I wanted to free myself up to evolve into doing other things. And it was partly wanting to expand and to do more of what I was really, really kind of passionate about and reaching more people and having more impact and inspiring people to take action so that they can thrive more in their lives. Well, that's my personal purpose-led mission statement, if you will. But there was definitely part of me that was like, I feel like I've been boxed in here. And the boot camp, the running, George the running guy, George the boot camp guy, I've no doubt that at some point in the future, if I feel like I'm being boxed in as George the speaker, I'll probably want to make another shift. I think I've got a good balance at the moment with the things that I'm doing. There's coaching, there's speaking, delivering workshops in corporate and so on well-being and habit building and resilience. And then there's my online program. So I have a number of different online groups and products and all sorts of other things. And it's synergistic, it's all working in the same direction, all the same messages, but just delivered in different ways. But I'm fairly sure that this isn't going to be me till I retire, right? There'll be another evolution at some point, probably.
It's like a constant period of flux, but a period where you're controlling the direction you go in, and you have to almost shed different skins in order to become that next thing as part of that next goal. And I can certainly empathise with that, having, so for years, from university and then my original job as a journalist was all to do with motorbikes. I did not drive a car until I was 30.
And whiskey as well, wasn't that one of your things? Like
whiskey became one of my things for a bit. I mean, no one would have expected that, given what I now do. But the motorcycle thing was like, oh yeah, he's the guy who rides motorbikes. He races motorbikes, and I dropped that completely. There came a point where I'd had my fill. Literally, I'd been like a kid in a sweet shop forever. And a lifetime's obsession. Motorbike was one of my first ever words as a kid. Just the guy next door had a scooter and I was obsessed with it. A lifetime's obsession kind of just was done. And that, people still who haven't seen me in 10 years go, "Oh, have you still got motorbikes?" I haven't ridden one in 4 years. And they that's a surprise to people, but it shows how what you project or what people, people need labels to understand who someone is, to fast track the process. Right? That question, what do you do? Well, it's not a great question, but we all ask it because it helps us understand, okay, this person it gives us an idea, and we're able to have something we can base the rest of the conversation on when we don't know someone, rightly or wrongly, but that's the importance of your identity and the label you put out. In your experience, where do you see people's identity labels as being either most helpful or even least helpful?
I think, kind of circling back around to something you just said there about, you have this identity and people ask you, what do you do? I remember when I was a personal trainer, and that was the main thing that I did, it was very easy to say, well, I'm a personal trainer, because people understood what that is. Like, the kids were asking, what do you do, Daddy? and it's like, well, they're different things. It's like I help people feel better. It's like, oh, you're a doctor. No, I'm not a doctor. So it's like...
So the kids need a label.
The kids, yeah, exactly. We all need labels, and it makes complete sense, right? We need to make sense of the world around us, and we all do it. We pigeonhole people. We say, well, they're there. We do it subconsciously because it helps us not have to waste energy trying to figure things out all the time. It's like, are they a threat to us? Are they an ally or a helper, or are they neutral? And can they help us with what we're doing or not? And we don't often think of on that as on a conscious level, but it's still happening on a subconscious level. We need to understand what people do. So it can be very helpful for us to have a sense of labeling, because it means that it's something that makes sense to us and that we can very easily describe to somebody else. There's a big thing in marketing, I'm sure you've come across it, where people say, or business coaches will say, right, what you do is if you're introducing yourself to someone at a networking event, you don't say what you are, you say what you do. So like, oh, hey George, how you doing? What do you do for anything? Oh, I help people transform their lives. Oh, well, that's interesting. Tell me more. It's like, so no one ever. but the idea being, like,
I mean, it depends when if people are expecting a job title, you come back with that. That's a bit like, well, yeah.
It is a bit of an in to conversation, but the way it's taught that's how you should do it. It's very, very. I feel it's very inauthentic. And actually, a lot of the time, people just want to know what area. What do you do? Are you an architect? Are you an accountant? Are you a lawyer? Are you a personal trainer? Are you in fitness? So I kind of say, I'm in the well-being world. I'm a speaker and a coach and an author, and I do things I help people. So I kind of keep it fairly vague, because then if they want to find out more, then there's the opportunity there. But I don't want to I help people thrive more in their life. Come on, ask me how I do it.
That is fascinating. Tell me more. Tell me more about that.
So,
what are you?
I think that's kind of a me thing, because I'm not a natural networker, and I'd much rather in those situations find out about the other person anyway. But certainly having a label, it's not just to help other people, it helps us as well, I think, to say, well, this is who I am. And we have labels for who we are in the family unit, in the community, in our work or business life as entrepreneurs or as employees or employers. Like, I'm the boss, I'm the employee, I'm the team member. And we kind of need to know our standing, we need to know who we are. It's fine to kind of want more and to want to evolve, but it's still useful to have those labels that we put on ourselves to say, well, this is who I am now, this is how I'm described. But that can also be a hindrance, which is your question, where is it useful, where is it not useful? Because if you label yourself as being somebody who's the kind of person who I just need to follow, right? Or I'm just somebody I'm not very confident, or I'm no good at public speaking, or I could never do that. There's beliefs there about the kind of person that we are and our limitations of ability or learning, and that is where we can hold ourselves back. Because all of a sudden, anything that's contrary to that, evidence that's contrary to that, we ignore that, and we just look for the evidence that backs up our claim that this is who I am. And I think that's where we can run into problems with labelling ourselves too much.
So it's interesting you mentioned there where the labelling can become less helpful in terms of an identity is when people are saying, oh, I could never do that, or that's not me. So it's very common in fitness, because it's a little more black and white and binary. I could never run a marathon.
Yeah.
But it could also be, oh, I could never start my own company. I could never ask my boss for a raise, whatever it might be. Now, do you think there's something there in the thought process, the self-identity, the beliefs that are inside, and the language that are used, that whole cocktail that produces that instant reaction, which is, I could never do X?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's always about the things you tell yourself, right? The filters that you have all around is these things we call cognitive distortions. So our perception, our model of the world isn't reality. Yours will be different to mine, or be different to the man in the street down there, or everybody else will filter things in a different way depending on expectations, experiences, perspectives, and beliefs, things that we've just had drilled into us as being the truth.
And our beliefs could come from anywhere, be they subconscious when we were 5 years old, through to something we just saw in a movie last week.
Yeah, exactly. It's normally from, we build a lot of these beliefs, these big foundational subconscious beliefs from a very early age. Beliefs about money, beliefs about relationships, beliefs about career, beliefs about what we should do, what's acceptable, what's polite. And a lot of the time when I'm coaching clients, we see these beliefs coming through in the language that we use. So you've got these superficial manifestations of those beliefs with the things we say out loud, but more importantly, the things we say to ourselves. And most people think that they're crazy because they have these conversations going on inside their heads, but everybody does. And it's the quality of those thoughts, the quality of those conversations that in general will influence the quality of your experience of life. This is the whole thing around resilience. It's the ABC. You've got your adversity, the thing that happens. You've got the beliefs that you tell yourself, and then you've got the consequences, how it makes you feel, and what it makes you do next. So if you're telling yourself positive stories and you can flip bad things into positive takeaways, then that's going to have an impact on how you feel, and probably when you get up and try again, or say, well, I knew that was going to happen. Those kind of things always happen to me. And that again brings us back around to the whole thing around identity. These sorts of things always happen to people like me. And if you tune into some of the language, if you take anything from this, then if you ever hear yourself saying people like me, or things happen to people like me, or anything
or
like
this
that,
always happens to me, or why does this always happen to me, or I could never,
then it's worth just stepping back and challenging that. Because there's normally evidence to the contrary. But the negativity bias that we all have, to where we focus on the bad things, we focus on the threats, the things that could harm us, and we don't give so much credit and power to the things that are positive in our lives.
And if you don't believe that, just watch the news.
Yeah,
one person gets killed on holiday, that's news, but 5 million people went on holiday, had a brilliant time. Well,
that's not newsworthy. No. And it makes sense. That's how we're still here from an evolutionary perspective, because when there's a saber-toothed tiger around every corner, you want to make sure that you're alert for those things. There could be danger that's going to kill you. But we still have that part of our brain that stops us from fully experiencing our life, because if we just focus on those negative things without questioning it, it's not to say we shouldn't acknowledge where there's dangers to our physical or psychological well-being, but if we don't challenge it and look at it with a wider perspective, that's where we can start becoming almost prisoners of our own minds, prisoners of our own stories and beliefs. And it's one of the most rewarding things in my career, in my life, when I'm working with clients, and they recognise when those are beliefs instead of truths, and they start challenging them, and all of a sudden they start changing their behaviours and changing their experience of life.
Because am I right in thinking that the part of the brain that is on the lookout for the thing that might kill us, that is, be careful, this is dangerous, that might happen, is so hardwired into us that, you might be able to consciously override it for one day, but long term, you cannot consciously override it, so you have to build a process to get around it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely parts where it's a reaction, and you have this whole reaction, but then the response. So it's like emotions. We don't get to choose if we're going to be scared if someone jumps out from behind a bush at us. Like, it happens automatically. But then we can process that initial reaction and make a different meaning of it compared with other people. Take, for example, somebody, you send a message to somebody. Well, here's a little kind of a fun example. You send a message to somebody on WhatsApp or Messenger, and you see that there's a kind of a grey tick appears, and then the blue tick appears. They've read it, but they haven't responded to you. Right? So, and an immediate reaction might be to think, well, they haven't responded to me. What's wrong? We're having a conversation, they just stopped. Did I say something wrong? And then a response might be, well, there could be all kinds of reasons why they haven't got back to me yet. Maybe they just picked it up on the fly, or maybe they just need to think about it for a moment. So we will interpret it different ways depending on how quickly we can get ourselves back to the logical centers of the brain. If we get caught up and we're feeling a bit insecure and we're feeling a little bit not very robust with our sense of certainty and self-esteem, and somebody's done something like that to us, well, that's how it appears, then it's very easy to get caught up in that more emotional way of thinking and saying, well, it's something, what have I done wrong? It becomes all about us.
What I say, and then you're replaying the message in your head.
I say, what did I do wrong? Yeah, that last message was a bit off as well.
Go back and look at them
Again,
again.
you go back and you start tearing yourself up inside, and then they come, oh, sorry, I literally opened that message and I dropped my phone. And it went off, I have to charge it up, or whatever. And there's normally a good reason for that happening.
But when you break that down like that, it sounds like the talk of a crazy person, right? If we vocalise that.
Yeah.
And the internal voice can, if you were to talk to anyone else like that, you'd probably expect them to punch you in the face, because you can be pretty unkind with them. But to go back to your point of, when people catch themselves saying, I could never, or why does this always happen to me, or, well, that always happens to me because, and these are, and you use those as a trigger to catch yourself. What do you recommend as a sort of basic format or process for, okay, the first bit is the self-awareness, you've got to catch yourself, so you've got to put yourself on guard for that.
Yeah.
But how do you then, okay, I've caught it, but now what do I do? Because, it might be a good day, it might be a bad day, whatever, I might be feeling like I can do anything, and it's very easy to process. It might be one of those days when you're not feeling great. Now, actually, how do you, I think very interesting. How would you process that? Now, I've caught it, what am I going to do?
Okay, so there are two sentence stems that can be quite useful for this. One of them is to finish the sentence, that's not true because, ... So when you say, well, that's not true because, and then you force yourself to think about all the reasons why that's not true, and this is particularly the case if you're using words like every time, always, never, because you only have to find one exception to that rule to then disprove it, right? Like, well, there was a time when the toast didn't land upside down, so therefore it doesn't always land that way. So that's the first one, that's not true because. The second one is, actually, I can't remember what the second one is now. No, here we go. We're back on now. Back online now. The second one is a better way of looking at that would be. So if you're,
so you depersonalise.
And you depersonalise. Like, well, okay, this is the way I'm looking at the moment. The implication there is that you're taking yourself out of the equation. You're looking at it from a wider perspective. So you go back to your point there. Some of the things we say to ourselves, like we would never dream of saying to another person. But if somebody was saying those things about themselves to you as a friend, you say, well, what's a better way of looking at that? And so you're looking at, not saying, well, I have to look at it this way, but what would a better way of looking at it be? And this is where we get into the realms of higher quality or better accuracy with our thinking. Because that's all our beliefs are. They're just inaccurate thought processes. So how do we improve the quality and the accuracy? Well, we get that perspective. Yes, you're right, you have to catch it in the moment, so you have to have the awareness. But actually it works if you do it in retrospect as well. So at the end of the day, you're journaling, you're writing down the sentence stem. A better way of looking at that would be ... and then you just bang, write down a list. Because the more you do that and reflect on it in this journaling without judgment kind of way, what happens is you become better then at catching it in the moment. So it's a process. You don't just suddenly become aware and able to do this. You just progress, not perfection, right? You just get a bit better at it. And the more you are able to catch yourself doing this, the better your experience of life again.
And in terms of that, catching yourself, is there something to be said for the idea that it could be, particularly for guys, I think, and particularly in the sporting space, if you've achieved, a degree of competence in your chosen sport or in your career, and like you talking about swimming, the idea of being a beginner again can be off-putting. Therefore, this should be a simple thing, it's just something in my head, it's my head, they're my thoughts, I should be able to work this out in about a week, right? It's a lot harder than that. Is there something to be said for the idea that even when you've caught the thought to try and meditate, and an hour later the thought is back again, or and you just can't sort it out. That time you did catch it, that was one rep. That was like going for that first run. And you're going to be able to lift it 2 reps next time. And eventually you're going to be able to, bench press your body weight, or whatever you want to get to, but you're not going to do this the first time and bench press your body weight.
But people expect to be able to. It's like, well, I don't have a positive mindset. You know, I run events called Cultivating a Positive Mindset. And I say, like, you come along to this event, you're not going to lead with a positive mindset, but what you'll have are the tools, the habits that you can start laying down that will help you work towards that. And if you're at a 3 out of 10 at the moment, if you can be a 4 out of 10 this time next week, or a 5 out of 10 the week after that, because you put these habits into practice, then that is progress that's going to start having a noticeable impact. But when you tell yourself, again, the stories that we say, if you tell yourself that, well, I should be able to do this, because other people can. It's just like the running a marathon. Well, I should be able to run a marathon. I've never run in my life, but I should be able to. Nobody says that. Nobody believes that they should be able to do. Normally the complete opposite. Like, I'll never be able to do that. But we put that pressure on ourselves to kind of perform at these higher cognitive levels. And the reality is that actually if we just gave ourselves a little bit of slack, took away the judgment, the self-judgment, because that's all it is, and said, well, I'm just going to get a bit better and I'm going to work on this. And if I don't catch myself every time, it doesn't matter. Because if I keep going with these habits, and that journaling thing in the evening, by the way, is a really powerful way of building that self-awareness. You've got mindfulness and meditation practices and breathing practices. These are great. That's like going to the gym and training. But if you also do the journaling at the end of the day and reflect back on the day, or the morning for the day before if you want to, then it just starts to tune you into these situations where you did have these more destructive, negative thinking patterns. And the more you do that, the more aware you become of it. And hey, presto, then you become aware in the moment, not just on reflection at the end of the day.
So in terms of that journaling process, because it's a lot of this stuff is very attractive to people. Whether and it's the same way that becoming good at a sport is attractive. Well, of course, I would like to have a more positive belief about myself and be able to project that, and then project that in my identity, which also reflects how people then respond to you. This can be really majorly life-changing stuff and very attractive. But there's also that thing of, like you said, it has to be convenient. So you didn't go and run the marathon to start precisely because you still had to do the school run. So I want to do the challenge. I'm going to build it in a way that fits with my life. So, if people are like, well, okay, I need to be super fit, I need to eat perfectly, I've got to be great at my career, I've got to be there for my kids the whole time, there's a lot to, and I've got to journal at night, So, if this is something that people think, I like the sound of this and I feel like there's stuff I could really get from it, what would you recommend as a best practice way to begin bringing that journaling in as a thing you do?
So probably the easiest and highest leverage piece of journaling you could do is the gratitude log, which is a bit different to the whole reflecting on negative mindset and thought processes, but it still ramps up your ability to become aware in the moment, and it gives you the benefit of actually feeling pretty good when you're doing it. So all you're doing here is just thinking about 3 good things that have happened to you, maybe during the course of the day or the last few days. And doing this on a regular basis has been proven to have an impact on your levels of happiness, rates of depression as well, over a kind of 6-month period when a lot of these studies are being carried out. And it doesn't take very long to do either. Plus, it's quite a nice thing to do. So you're literally sitting there and you're jotting down, you don't have to write pages and pages, it takes like 3 minutes, 1 minute per thing. You just write down, I had a really nice catch up with Warren earlier today. And then your mind goes back to doing that thing. So I'm really quite grateful for that. It's just a really nice way to spend the day. So I had some great positive emotions, good bit of connection, really nice time. He's going to make me a really nice lunch later on.
I'll see what's in the fridge.
But you think about that one thing, and even just for a few moments, doing that at the end of the day, it makes you feel happy again. You get to relive it, you savour the experience. And by reliving it, you then, like, I'm grateful right now, I'm happy right now, but by reliving it again later on in the day, I get to re-experience that. Plus, it makes me better attuned in to recognising when good things are happening in the moment that they're happening. So you don't have to then wait till the end of the day and think, okay, what was I grateful for today? Oh, there's this, this and this. because you're actually noticing more of it when it's happening.
Here's another one that I can put on the list later.
Exactly, and you start really immersing yourself. Like I walked out of the house the other day. We've got this lovely kind of tree in the front garden. I don't know what kind of tree it is, but the leaves go a beautiful orangey, reddy colour. And I just walked out there. I just stood there for a few moments and just looked at the tree and thought, wow, how amazing to have that tree and those vibrant colours like in my front garden as I walk out of the house. Fantastic. And I got on with my day. And so I was grateful there and then, and I reflected on that later on. So it doesn't have to be big things; it can be the little things as well. But what a difference having that practice makes to your to how you go through your day, and how that offsets some of the negative stuff that does happen to all of us, the challenges, the problems, the things we have to deal with. Again, negativity bias, we're more likely to focus on the things that aren't going right or are missing in our lives or within us, compared with the things that we do have in abundance. So this is about trying to rebalance the equation there and paying more attention to the good things. And by doing that, it also helps tune us into our own thought processes, which goes back into what we were saying there about tracking the negative thought patterns. So that would be my advice for anybody who's looking at doing some really simple access way into journaling. Just the 3 good things exercise. Each evening, do it on your phone, just on a notepad on your phone, or just write them down, old school, pen and paper, and do it for a week and notice what you notice about the difference it makes.
And that, I guess you could also regard as, because everyone's got 3 or 4 minutes. Just switch your phone off at 8 o'clock at night, don't go near social media, there's 2 hours right back for everyone. At that point, if you've only got to come up with 3 things, that's not an onerous list. And I love your point that it can be, it could be, it was my kid's birthday and Elton John flew in and sung live in the garden. Now, that would be
something to be grateful for, yeah.
That would be something to be grateful for. But it doesn't have to be that, because it could literally be as simple as, wow, we've got drinking water out of a tap. How many million people in the world don't have drinking water out of a tap?
Yeah, absolutely. I was on the train on the way in from Tame this morning, and the train before had been cancelled. This one had to make an extra stop, so it was super packed. So I had to stand up, and I'm not great at just like standing and not doing stuff. But then I kind of thought, okay, well, what am I grateful for? And as I stood there, I was, I've got the ability to get on a train and be in London within 45 minutes. How fantastic is that? I'm warm. I can stand up.
I can walk on the train and I can stand up.
So all of these thoughts, that's what I chose in that moment to fill my mind with, instead of thinking, flipping out, these trains, when are they going to sort this out?
And they're always like this.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe they are, but I have to do it every now and then. Coming into London is still, I do it infrequently enough so it's still exciting and a novelty. I'm not sure I want to do it every day. But point is, you get to decide the thoughts. There's a great Bruce Lee quote where he says, the mind is a fertile garden, and you can choose whether you feed the weeds or the plants. And that's exactly what it is. So do I put energy into those negative thoughts? It doesn't change anything, it just makes me feel a bit crappy. Or do I put the energy into the positive things? So it's a choice, and it's a choice that we all have. Yeah, it's harder to do it sometimes because we're naturally drawn towards the complaining and the whinging and the, even if it's just making ourselves feel bad rather than out to other people. But it's still a choice, and when we accept that it's a choice, and then we start trying to change it, making a different choice, that's where things can really start to change.
I think to bring this full circle back to George the running guy, you're doing your, whether it's running or Ironman or whatever your sport or your goal may be, you're going to have days when your training does not go to plan. The rear mech on your bike is going to break. You're going to have a puncture. It's going to be raining and cold when you want to go running. You're going to get an injury, whatever it may be. At that point, there can be, even for the most hardy, positive people out there, those moments where training can become all-consuming, and you can just go, this is never going to work. I'm not going to finish my race, and suddenly you get all this stress from something that should be giving you a lot of joy. Is there an opportunity there to flip that by simply using something like, what's good about this situation? Instead of dwelling on, like you're on the train, what am I grateful for? Instead of, oh God, the train's always late.
Yeah.
You know, that time, okay, I got injured 6 weeks out from my race. That's not good. But I could dwell on that. Instead, I could go, what's good about this? And just force yourself to come up with 5 answers.
Yeah.
See what it takes you. Is there anything in that? Does it translate
Yeah, absolutely.
that way?
It's not an easy thing to do. It can feel a bit Pollyanna, where you're just looking for everything's positive, everything's good, head in the sand. But if actually it's not going to change the situation, then why not try and shift your mindset towards positive? I don't think there's nothing wrong with feeling disappointed. There's nothing wrong with feeling sadness. There's nothing wrong with feeling angry or scared. It's just an emotion, and it's your body and your mind's way of giving you some signals, like the smoke alarm goes off. You don't think, oh, that smoke alarm keeps going off. You look for the fire. So those emotions, they will tell you something, and this is where you can track away and look back and think, well, what is it that it's trying to tell me, and what lessons can I take away from this? And a closing kind of example story, if you will, was last September I attempted the Frog Graham Round. I think I told you about this.
Which, just for context, the Bob Graham Round
Yes.
is just about the hardest thing in fell running. Even Scott Jurek, the legendary US ultrarunner, only made it by minutes in the 24-hour cutoff for this self-driven challenge around every. I can't remember how many peaks it is, but it's an insane amount of ascent and descent off-road in the Peak District. Brutal. The Frog Graham Round,
yes, it's wetter cousin.
It's something else, right?
So it starts at the same place, Keswick, and it goes. The Bob is, I think, 66 miles, 24-hour cut-off. There is no cut-off for the Frog, but it's only 40 miles. Still takes in some pretty hideous climbs, and I think 16,000 feet of ascent in total. And it's got 4 swims across various lakes.
There's the kicker, right? So basically we're talking a 40-mile self-navigated off-road trail run through fell country, loads of ascent, descent, rough ground, pretty much forget footpaths the whole time. You're going to be mapping yourself cross country with 4 swims thrown in. So we're talking swim run over 40 miles in the north of England.
Yeah.
It's not a heated pool, is it? How fast the swim?
It's not. The swims, they're not that long, between sort of 300 metres and a mile, 1,800 metres, I think the longest one, across Derwent water. So I did this last year in September, or rather I attempted it. And I got I was doing it with a chap called Guy, and we would do it. We had our support crew, because it's just you can do it if you want. Just show you check.
You have to register in advance.
Yeah,
right?
no, you don't register in advance. You just, when you've done it, you just send off a picture of you at Moot Hall in Keswick, the beginning and the end, and your GPX. So here are the times I was at various locations. So we did it. We bombed up there, and by that point, bear in mind, I've done my 10 and 10. Then the next year, 100 miler, then Ironman, then another 100 miler,
and at each time, tick.
Exactly.
Big new challenge, tick.
So
Big new challenge,
got up
tick.
for this next one, and it never crossed my mind that I would not be able to complete it. It just wasn't. It wasn't something that I'd thought about.
Which is a valuable part of the mindset process.
Which is a good
What's
thing.
your identity? Well, I always finish these things.
Yeah, I'll train, I'll turn up, and I'll do it. I'll get through. And we had the worst weather possible. Like, it was just horrendous, and in the end, it was just dangerous to be up there in the mountains. And so we got about a third of the way around, maybe a half the way around, and we're like, no, we have to can this. We were so far off schedule, we would have been swimming in the dark, which neither of us had ever done at the end. So we thought, right, we'll just leave it. And my immediate reaction was disappointment. Although I did enjoy eating the rest of the picnic that we prepared. That's always a bonus of ultra running. There's lots of food, and it was easy to blame the weather, because it had been, like, nobody could argue that weather was just hideous. But then I realised that I was giving away all of my power to the weather, and I was blaming the weather. And it was a reason, but it was masking a lot of lessons that I was on the cusp of learning. But
so you would have missed those lessons if you'd only gone, it was bad weather, that's why it didn't happen.
Exactly.
Even though it was bad weather, and it didn't happen.
I'd never been to the Lake District before, like Strike 1. That was my first visit. that could have been handy. People said, "Oh, you should go up and do a recce." Yeah, I'll be fine. Like, you know, some hills in Oxford.
I've been on the towpath.
It's very hilly. I didn't have proper trail shoes. I didn't have like a really sound way of navigating, so I had the OS map app, brilliant, but not so great in the rain when you've got to be getting your phone out and putting in a 6-digit PIN code to access it each time. And okay, where am I going now? Because it was just teeming down with rain the whole time, really windy. And kind of all these, I had trained as well as I could have done. And what I realised was that I got complacent over those 4 weeks, those 4 years of successfully achieving challenges. And in my mind, it's like, well, time to do it. But the reality was I trained, I researched, I prepared myself to the nth degree for each of those. And I hadn't done the same diligent preparation for this challenge. So what that meant was that I could, first of all, massive learning from that experience. But then I went away over the next 6 months and I put those problems, I solved them. So I did another recce of the area. I got better kit. Mizuno sorted me out with some fantastic trail shoes. Wow, what a revelation. Wearing trail shoes, running on trails. Who'd have thought that would make a difference?
Those running flats weren't the best thing after all.
I got better kit all round. I kind of recce'd the area a lot more. So I did a lot more training and preparation for it. Went back in July with a couple of guys, Nigel and Steve, and we successfully completed it. And that meant more to me having had that problem, that challenge, that failure back in September than it would have done if I just turned up in September and had managed to do it. But yeah, great, fantastic. But I didn't earn it. You know, it's like, Warren, when you train for something and you achieve it, you feel like you've earned that, and it's so much more powerful and meaningful than if something's easy. And that was the big thing that I took away from that. But that was the whole unpacking my thoughts and taking that step back and thinking, all right, well, this is a failure, but what can I learn from this? And realising where I was attributing the source of the failure, which was to the weather in that case, and saying, well, what else could I learn from this? Not just picking weekend better for the weather, but what else can I learn from this? And I figured out 3 or 4 things that I needed to do differently in order to be successful the next time.
That's a really nice way of sort of demonstrating how all this can come together. And I think it feeds into something I was reading recently. I've been reading a lot of Napoleon Hill's stuff recently, which certainly is dated.
Timeless.
If you're coming to it fresh, it was written in the sort of 1930s, 40s, 50s. It's of its time, but there is, like you say, there is some gold in there. And if anyone is interested in this sort of stuff, there is actually a series on Amazon Prime of his videos, Napoleon Hill's Master Key. 7-minute videos. They're effectively the YouTube sort of self-help motivation achievement videos of their day.
Wow.
And they really are of their day. But one of his things is every failure or defeat carries within it the seed of an equivalent or greater success. I've mangled the words a bit, but that's the sentiment. And that's what you were able to unpick with your Frog Graham, because actually it's totally legitimate, rough weather, for you to say it was the weather.
Yeah.
But that, by definition, means, well, if the weather clears up, then I'd have achieved it.
Yeah.
Which, if you look deep down, you think, well, no, I wasn't. I was not ready. I was too complacent. By taking that step further, going, what's good about this situation, or whatever process you use to get to that, you were able to pick it out and go, no, and to come back much stronger, much better, having learned a lot as a person, stuff that you can then feed back into your coaching and everything else, share with other people, and successfully achieve the challenge.
Yeah. I love that idea of every failure has the seed of a greater success, because that's been my experience. It's not to play down the importance of doing the work on yourself to be able to find that when you're feeling like at your lowest point, your lowest ebb, and like feeling like you're a failure and it's just everything's going wrong. It's not easy to say, well, okay, fuck your ideas up. Come on, where's the good in this? How can you be more optimistic? Because that kind of makes it harder and worse sometimes to think that you should be able to do it. Sometimes it just takes a bit of time. But there is nearly always something positive that you can take from it, even if it's the way you respond to a real tragic adversity in your life. Like something that wasn't in your control, it just happened and it was terrible. The thing that you can influence, if not control, is your response to that, how you support other people around you, and then how you show up as a result of the way you process that. And then you take that strength that you built with this adversity into the next thing that you do. So it doesn't change the situation, bad things are going to happen, but it can change you, and it can change you positively or it can change you negatively. And a lot of time we do get to choose which way we go.
George, I know it took us 2.5 years to get to this point. I am so glad we did. And I know that in terms of points you have to get to, there's one you have to get to quite soon after this. So we'll try exactly. We'll try and squeeze that lunch in quick. Thank you.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Well, a great big thank you to George Anderson for coming and joining me for that conversation today. And if you want to check out more of George's stuff, you can find him at bygeorgeanderson, all one word, .com. Links are in the show notes below. And of course, remember, if you're looking for the very best in high-performance natural sports nutrition, don't go anywhere apart from 33fuel.com. We've got everything you could possibly need. So with that all covered, that's the admin done. Hope you enjoyed the show. Look forward to seeing you for another one. Thanks for joining us this time.